Hello everyone, welcome back to Pixel Village and I'm Radha Krishnan. Well, this one is an unplanned video. We put it together in such a short notice because we thought it was important, hence we kind of quickly put all our lights together and camera together and kind of created this video. Okay, to the subject. The other day, a follower walked into Pixel Village wanting to share some of the images that he created. We keep getting them, regularly at Pixel Village, and people who are living around us or who are in the nearby villages, towns, they tend to kind of call, find out our place and walk in and, spend some time with us. You're welcome to do that. This young man, while showing his images very proudly, he also said that, "Look, sir, I shot all these images in manual mode." So that kind of kept me thinking, why is he? He kept on saying that many occasions, as if shooting on manual mode was a big thing. And I started thinking about it and I asked him, why are you saying that it is shot on manual mode? Why didn't you try any other modes in the camera? So he said his mentor, his teacher, will not allow him to do it. And the mentor insisted that all his students must shoot in manual mode. If you don't shoot in manual mode, you are not a photographer, to that effect. That suggestion or that instruction seems to have gone really kind of deep into his brain and kind of it gave him a feeling that without manual mode, well, he cannot be a photographer. And that's when I started kind of thinking about myself. And I couldn't remember when was the last time I shot in manual mode. In fact, when I thought about it, I could actually recollect a few occasions, which actually I can count on my fingers, were actually shot using the manual mode. So, am I not a photographer? I hate to say this again, all right? I started photography way back during the early 80s when it was film and film only. During that time, almost all cameras that I had handled, my first camera was a Pentax MX. Almost all cameras, barring a few, for all kind of manual cameras. For example, this one. This is a completely manual camera. This is the FM2 Titanium. Completely manual. Of course, this has a battery inside, a button cell inside to kind of power the exposure meter inside. Other than that, this is completely manual. Now, during this time, well, you had to depend entirely on your manual mode. You had to anticipate a lot of things. You did not have too many ISOs or the ASA, film speeds, to work with. So you're working with one fixed ISO or the ASA, and you had only two parameters to kind of fool around with or work with: the aperture and the shutter speed. And during that time, almost all cameras employed the center-weighted metering system for the exposure meter, in-camera metering. Now, center-weighted exposure meter is a tricky one, okay? It usually gets fooled by backlight. Very unlike the modern cameras, which has matrix metering and spot metering, this guy would get fooled almost all times because of the flare or strong backlights and things like that. At that kind of scenario, the manual mode was very important because you needed to know the kind of compensation you have to dial in to get your required effect. Of course, you must remember, you had no LCDs to preview your images. Now, the moment I shifted to my first camera, which had an auto exposure inside, which was the Canon AE1 Super, what I remember is I completely stopped using the manual mode, except when I was shooting with flashes. I would very comfortably resort to the AE mode, the auto exposure mode, usually an aperture priority exposure mode. And I don't really remember losing any picture because of that decision. And that practice continued throughout. Well, then I graduated to an F5. That was my first full-on professional camera that I bought in the early 2000s. This is an amazing camera, a war horse. I have not shot manual mode in this camera at all, period. It's been always aperture priority mode, either set to a matrix metering or a spot metering. Again, I have never shot center weighted, exposure meter reading. The only exception being when I shoot with multiple flashes. Well, during that time, I would definitely use a flash meter to measure the flashes. Subsequently, we all got upgraded to digital cameras, and the digital cameras became more and more powerful. The LCDs got better, so you could preview your images, and along with the histogram, well, you could take a very, very good decision. I think it is not the manual mode that you need to excessively depend upon. I think since the modern cameras, especially modern mirrorless cameras like this XS10, now this is an entry-level camera. Why did I pick an entry-level camera? Because it is the entry-level photographer, the beginner photographer, who actually loses their confidence when people who are guiding them or people who are around them insist upon, the photographer shooting in manual mode. And yes, very predictably, anybody who's trying to shoot in manual mode in the initial stages will definitely, end up with a lot of wrongly exposed images. Now that is likely to put a beginner photographer into a kind of a tight spot, and it's highly likely that he develops an insecurity and kind of starts feeling that, look, I am not good enough, or I cannot be a good photographer. Now, mind you, that viewer who walked into the studio the other day claiming to be a manual mode photographer, he's an IT professional, okay? So he is a well-educated person. So people like that kind of believes heavily on the so-called manual mode. But I think it is all in the head, that belief, and also your ability to take a good picture. It all starts with seeing that image in your head first, not through the viewfinder, not through an LCD. It has to happen first in your head. If you're setting up a shot, or if you're doing a run and gun on the street, wherever, even if you're with camera or without camera, whatever that you're seeing, if it's worthy of a photographic frame, then that image should be first made in your head. You should definitely see how you want to expose it. Do you want to expose it on an average meter reading, or on a spot meter reading, or on a matrix meter reading? Well, in most modern cameras, you have this exposure compensation switch right next to it. So if you pick a comfortable ISO, and for me, well, my personal preference is aperture priority auto. The reason being, I wanted to tell a story through controlling my depth. I don't shoot action, I don't shoot wildlife. So my stories are conveyed through depth, creating a certain depth. So I decide what aperture I want to work with, and I let the camera decide the shutter speed. I don't worry. These days, I don't worry about it at all, because most of the cameras have IBIS. So even if it is going low, well, the technology is there to take care of you. So I would urge the photographer not to excessively worry about the manual mode, where you are, as a photographer, got to set everything up. Instead, well, select your ISO depending on the light that is available, so that is taken care of. Select whichever mode that you want to put one mode onto auto, either shutter priority auto or an aperture priority auto, depending on the subject that you're shooting, and concentrate on your frame rather than trying to get your EV values to 0, and just shoot. Make the right metering decision, okay? and also use that exposure compensation dial to do your fine tuning. Well, I don't think you will need a manual mode ever again, because the cameras these days have so much of dynamic range. Okay, so much of capabilities and extremely fast to focus and all that, and the chances of you losing an image is very, very less. Well, in fact, with all these features built into these modern cameras, and if you still manage to take a bad shot, an out of focus shot or a wrongly exposed shot, then you should seriously consider another profession. If you are interested in learning photography, please head over to pixelvillage.com. We have a set of fantastic photography teachers there taking classes for you. They're all recorded sessions. You can watch the bouquet of offering, and if you like it, you can subscribe. Bye for now.